welcome to another gentle journey through history. Tonight on The Very Boring Historian, we explore a curious thought experiment that takes us into the refined drawing rooms of Victorian England, where the ritual of tea reigned supreme, and imagine what would happen if we introduced something as commonplace to us as an automatic coffee maker into their carefully ordered world. Picture, if you will, a typical Victorian afternoon in 1875. The drawing room is arranged just so, with antimacassars draped over the horsehair sofa and the mahogany tea table positioned precisely where the afternoon light filters through heavy brocade curtains. Mrs. Adelaide Worthington, a proper lady of middle-class sensibilities, is preparing for her weekly tea circle. She moves with the measured grace that her finishing school drilled into her decades ago, each gesture deliberate and meaningful. The preparation for afternoon tea in Victorian times was itself a meditation in patience and precision. Mrs. Worthington begins her ritual 2 hours before her guests arrive. First, she instructs her housemaid to fill the large copper kettle with fresh water from the kitchen pump. This water must be drawn specifically for tea, never reused from earlier cooking, as any proper Victorian lady knows that previously boiled water produces a flat, lifeless cup that would shame the household. While the water begins its slow journey to a rolling boil over the coal range, Mrs. Worthington turns her attention to the tea leaves themselves. She unlocks her mahogany tea caddy, a wedding gift from 23 years past, with its small brass key that hangs from her chatelaine. Inside, 3 compartments hold different varieties of loose tea leaves. The black tea, imported at considerable expense from Assam, occupies the largest compartment. The green tea, less fashionable but still proper for certain occasions, fills the middle section. The smallest compartment contains her precious Earl Grey, scented with bergamot oil and reserved for only the most distinguished visitors. Today's gathering calls for the reliable black tea. Mrs. Worthington measures out exactly 1 teaspoon per expected guest, plus 1 for the pot, using a small silver spoon inherited from her grandmother. She counts carefully under her breath. Mrs. Pemberton, Mrs. Ashworth, Miss Caroline Fletcher, and her elderly aunt, Mrs. Beatrice Morton. 5 guests, therefore 6 teaspoons of leaves. The measurement must be precise. Too little tea results in a weak, embarrassing brew that suggests economy over hospitality. Too much creates a bitter concoction that no amount of milk or sugar can rescue. The tea leaves rest in the bottom of her second-best china teapot, a spode pattern in blue and white that has served faithfully for 12 years. Her best set, the Wedgwood with hand-painted roses, remains locked in the china cabinet for truly special occasions. The teapot must be warmed before the leaves meet the water. Mrs. Worthington pours a small amount of hot water into the pot, swirls it gently to heat the ceramic walls, then discards this water through the kitchen door onto her herb garden. Now comes the crucial moment that separates competent tea making from exceptional tea making. The water in the copper kettle has reached a full rolling boil. Mrs. Worthington lifts it carefully, her movements practiced from decades of repetition, and pours the boiling water over the waiting tea leaves. The water must be actively boiling when it touches the leaves, not a moment before, not a moment after. Victorian tea wisdom holds that water which has boiled too long becomes flat and cannot properly extract the essential oils from the tea leaves. The steeping process requires exactly 4 minutes, not 3, not 5. Mrs. Worthington uses her mother's small porcelain timer, shaped like a cottage, which sits on the mantelpiece for this very purpose. During these 4 minutes, she cannot simply wait idly. The tea service must be arranged on the silver tray that her husband gave her for their 10th anniversary. Each cup must be positioned just so, with the handle pointing toward 4 o'clock when viewed from the guest's seat. The matching saucers align precisely beneath their cups. The sugar bowl, filled with white cubes that she cut herself from a larger block using special sugar nips, occupies the center right of the tray. The cream pitcher, containing thick cream that rose to the top of this morning's milk delivery, balances the composition on the center left. The small silver tongs for the sugar cubes must be placed beside the sugar bowl at exactly the right angle. The tiny silver spoons for stirring, each no longer than her thumb, rest in a neat row beside the cups. Mrs. Worthington has specific spoons designated only for tea service, never used for cooking or other household purposes, as this would contaminate them with foreign flavors that might spoil the delicate taste of properly brewed tea. When the cottage timer chimes its gentle bell, Mrs. Worthington returns to the teapot. She stirs the contents once, clockwise, with a long silver spoon kept specifically for this purpose. Then she places the tea strainer over the first cup and begins pouring. The amber liquid flows through the fine mesh, catching every tea leaf, every particle that might mar the smooth perfection of the finished product. She fills each cup 3/4 full, leaving room for cream or milk according to each guest's preference. The ritual extends beyond mere preparation into the ceremony of serving itself. When Mrs. Pemberton and the other ladies arrive, they gather in the drawing room with the same measured grace that governs all proper Victorian social interaction. The conversation flows as gently as the tea, touching on appropriate topics such as the weather, recent charitable endeavors, and perhaps mild commentary on the latest fashions glimpsed during yesterday's shopping expedition to the high street. Each guest receives her tea according to her stated preference. Mrs. Pemberton takes hers with 2 lumps of sugar and a splash of cream. Mrs. Ashworth prefers milk rather than cream, and only the smallest amount. Miss Fletcher, being young and unmarried, follows the lead of her elders in all things, including the preparation of her tea. Aunt Beatrice, whose advanced age grants her certain privileges, requests an extra lump of sugar, which Mrs. Worthington provides without comment, though privately she considers it slightly excessive. The conversation continues in measured tones, while the ladies sip their tea from delicate china cups that ring with a clear note when tapped gently with a spoon. They hold their cups properly, with thumb and forefinger grasping the handle, the little finger never extended despite popular misconceptions about proper etiquette. Between sips, they place their cups precisely back on their saucers, never leaving them balanced precariously on chair arms or side tables. Now into this scene of ordered perfection, imagine the sudden appearance of a modern automatic coffee maker. Picture Mrs. Worthington's bewilderment as she examines this peculiar contraption with its glass carafe, plastic housing, and mysterious electrical cord that terminates in an equally mysterious three-pronged plug. The very concept of electricity and domestic appliances would require explanation that might take the entire afternoon, as Victorian homes of 1875 relied on gas lighting at best, with most still depending on oil lamps and candles after sunset. But let us assume, for the sake of our gentle exploration, that Mrs. Worthington somehow possesses both electrical power and a basic understanding of how to operate this strange device. Her first confusion would center around the coffee beans themselves. Coffee, while not entirely unknown in Victorian England, occupied a distinctly secondary position to tea in the hierarchy of acceptable beverages. Coffee houses existed primarily as male domains where gentlemen gathered to discuss business and politics, not refined spaces where ladies might congregate for social intercourse. The concept of pre-ground coffee, sealed in vacuum-packed containers, would mystify Mrs. Worthington completely. In her world, any commodity consumed in the household arrives in its most basic form and undergoes preparation by hand. Tea leaves arrive as whole leaves, carefully dried and packaged. Sugar comes in solid blocks that require cutting. Spices arrive whole and need grinding. The notion that someone else in a distant factory might have already processed coffee beans into powder would challenge her fundamental understanding of proper household management. Even if she somehow acquired ground coffee, the brewing process itself would contradict everything she understands about proper beverage preparation. The coffee maker demands that she pour cold water into a reservoir, add coffee grounds to a paper filter, and then simply press a button. The machine takes over from there, heating the water to its own predetermined temperature, controlling the steeping time according to its internal mechanisms, and producing a finished beverage without any input from her skill, experience, or judgment. This automation would disturb Mrs. Worthington on multiple levels. First, it removes the careful measurement and timing that she considers essential to demonstrating her competence as a hostess. How can she take pride in serving her guests when a machine performs all the crucial steps? Second, it eliminates the personal touch that transforms mere beverage preparation into an expression of care and hospitality. When Mrs. Worthington hand measures tea leaves and carefully times the steeping, she demonstrates her attention to her guests' comfort and her willingness to invest effort in their pleasure. The coffee maker's speed would also trouble her sense of proper timing and social rhythm. Her tea ceremony requires nearly 2 hours from start to finish, time that allows for gradual transition from daily concerns into the peaceful world of social visiting. The automatic coffee maker produces its finished product in mere minutes, rushing a process that should unfold slowly and deliberately. Furthermore, the individual serving nature of coffee conflicts with Victorian social customs built around sharing and communal experience. Tea service centers on a single pot that serves the entire gathering, symbolizing unity and shared experience. Each guest receives tea poured from the same source, prepared by the same hands, steeped for the same amount of time. The coffee maker, designed for individual preferences, and multiple small batches throughout the day, fragments this communal aspect into isolated personal consumption. The flavor profile itself would challenge Victorian palates accustomed to the gentle, nuanced character of properly prepared tea. Coffee's bold, sometimes bitter notes would seem harsh compared to tea's subtle complexity. Victorian taste in beverages, like Victorian taste in most things, favored refinement over intensity, delicacy over boldness. The strong, direct flavor of coffee might overwhelm palates trained to appreciate tea's gentle gradations of flavor. Mrs. Worthington would also struggle with coffee's informal serving style. Tea demands proper china cups, matching saucers, and silver spoons. Coffee culture, even in its modern refined forms, accepts ceramic mugs, paper cups, and plastic stirrers. The casual attitude toward serving vessels would violate her deeply held beliefs about the relationship between proper presentation and proper respect for guests. The social implications would prove equally troubling. Victorian tea time served specific social functions beyond mere refreshment. It provided a structured environment for ladies to maintain social connections, exchange appropriate information, and demonstrate their mastery of complex social rules. The leisurely pace allowed for careful navigation of conversation topics, subtle social positioning, and the elaborate dance of politeness that governed Victorian social interaction. Coffee's association with quick consumption, individual preference, and business-oriented environments would make it unsuitable for these delicate social purposes. How could Mrs. Worthington use a rapid, automated beverage service to demonstrate her social skills, her attention to detail, or her commitment to proper hospitality? The machine eliminates opportunities for her to display the competencies that define her role as a proper Victorian lady. Even the cleanup process would disturb her sense of order. Her tea service requires careful washing of delicate china, proper storage of silver implements, and meticulous attention to maintaining her equipment in perfect condition. The coffee maker, with its removable plastic parts and disposable filters, suggests a throwaway mentality completely foreign to Victorian concepts of quality, permanence, and proper stewardship of household goods. The timing of coffee consumption would also clash with Victorian daily rhythms. Tea time occupies specific, well-defined periods within the day's structure. Morning tea, afternoon tea, and high tea each serve distinct purposes and follow particular rules. Coffee's flexibility, its suitability for consumption at any hour, would undermine the temporal boundaries that give shape and meaning to Victorian domestic life. As Mrs. Worthington contemplates this strange machine and its alien beverage, she might wonder about the society that created such a device. What kind of people value speed over ceremony, automation over personal skill, individual preference over shared experience? The coffee maker represents not just a different approach to beverage preparation, but an entirely different philosophy of domestic life, social interaction, and the proper relationship between technology and human activity. In her quiet drawing room, surrounded by the familiar implements of her tea ceremony, Mrs. Worthington might conclude that while this coffee maker demonstrates remarkable mechanical ingenuity, it cannot provide what truly matters in beverage service: the opportunity to express care, demonstrate skill, create beauty, and strengthen social bonds through shared ritual. The machine may produce a perfectly adequate drink, but it cannot produce the sense of accomplishment, social connection, and aesthetic satisfaction that flows from her careful, deliberate, thoroughly human approach to the ancient art of serving hot beverages to friends. And so, as the afternoon light fades through her brocade curtains, Mrs. Worthington returns to her familiar tea caddy, her reliable copper kettle, and her cherished china teapot, confident that some things improve not through automation and speed, but through patience, practice, and the irreplaceable human touch that transforms simple preparation into meaningful ceremony. Perhaps in her final contemplation of this curious coffee-making device, Mrs. Worthington might consider the deeper implications of such mechanical efficiency. She recognizes that the machine represents more than mere convenience. It embodies a fundamental shift in how humans relate to their daily rituals. In her world, the preparation of tea serves as a bridge between the practical necessities of life and the higher aspirations of civilization. Each careful measurement, each precise timing, each graceful gesture contributes to what she might call the elevation of the mundane into something approaching art. The coffee maker, efficient though it may be, reduces this elevated process to mere utility. It acknowledges no difference between a hurried morning gulp and a leisurely afternoon respite, between solitary consumption and social gathering, between the needs of a laborer seeking quick energy and those of a refined lady cultivating social graces. Such indiscriminate functionality would strike Mrs. Worthington as oddly democratic in a way that makes her slightly uncomfortable, as if the machine fails to recognize the important distinctions that give structure and meaning to civilized life. She might also wonder about the people who would choose such automation over personal involvement in their daily rituals. What manner of existence demands such speed that one cannot spare the time for proper beverage preparation? What kind of social obligations leave so little room for the gentle ceremonies that bind communities together? In her ordered world, time spent in careful preparation represents time well invested in the maintenance of standards, relationships, and personal character. The very concept of disposable filters would perplex her further. Mrs. Worthington's tea strainer, inherited from her mother and destined for her own daughter, represents continuity across generations. It connects her daily ritual to those who came before and those who will follow, creating an unbroken chain of proper domestic practice. The idea of discarding part of one's tea equipment after each use would seem not just wasteful, but somehow disrespectful to the very concept of permanence and tradition that gives weight to domestic ritual. As darkness settles over her drawing room and the gas lamps cast their gentle glow across the mahogany furniture, Mrs. Worthington might reflect that this strange coffee machine represents a world moving quickly toward an uncertain future. While she cannot deny its mechanical cleverness, she remains convinced that true satisfaction comes not from the destination but from the journey, not from the final cup, but from the mindful process that creates it. In choosing speed over ceremony, efficiency over elegance, the coffee maker's world seems to have lost something essential about what it means to transform mere sustenance into an expression of care, skill, and human dignity.